Sonder. You're sitting at a red light and glance into the car beside you. Someone's drumming their fingers on the steering wheel. Someone else is staring straight ahead, like they're replaying an argument from 3 days ago. Later that night, you pass apartment windows glowing against the dark and catch tiny fragments of lives. Somebody folding laundry, somebody cooking, somebody pacing while talking on the phone. For a second, your own life feels strangely small, like you've been standing in the center of a stage only to realize there are millions of stages happening at the exact same time. Every stranger suddenly feels less like background scenery and more like the main character of a story you'll never hear. That feeling is called Sonder, a term coined by writer John Koenig to describe the realization that every random person has a life as vivid and complicated as your own. Your brain normally filters people into categories.
Spotlight effect. You're walking away from a conversation and suddenly remember the weird way you phrased a sentence 20 seconds ago. Maybe you laughed too loudly. Maybe your voice cracked slightly. Maybe you stumbled over a word and corrected yourself twice. The rest of the evening becomes an investigation into whether everyone noticed. You replay it on the drive home. You replay it while brushing your teeth. By tomorrow morning, you've somehow promoted a 3-second moment into a social catastrophe. This is the spotlight effect, the tendency to massively overestimate how much other people notice and remember your mistakes. The most accepted explanation is simple. You're present for 100% of your own embarrassing moments, and only tiny fractions of everyone else's. Your brain mistakes that difference in perspective for difference in importance. What makes it different from ordinary self-consciousness is the assumption of an audience. It isn't just that you're embarrassed, it's that you feel observed. Meanwhile, everyone else is busy worrying about their own awkward sentence from 20 minutes earlier. Most spotlights exist entirely in the mind of the person standing underneath them.
Monachopsis. You're with friends, you're included in the conversation, people are smiling at you. Nobody has done anything wrong, and somehow you still feel slightly out of place. Not rejected, not disliked, just offset by a few inches from where everyone else seems to be standing socially. Like everyone else got the instruction manual, and yours got lost in the mail somewhere along the way. That feeling is called monachopsis, a term describing the subtle but persistent sense of not quite fitting into your surroundings. It's thought to come partly from social comparison.
The liking gap? You leave a conversation convinced you talked too much. You mentally highlight every pause that lasted half a second too long, and every joke that landed with less enthusiasm than expected. A few hours later, you're already preparing for the possibility that the other person probably didn't enjoy talking to you very much. Then they message first, or they wave enthusiastically the next time they see you. That mismatch is called the liking gap, the tendency to underestimate how much other people enjoy your company after social interactions. Researchers consistently find that people rate conversations more positively than their partners expect them to. Your brain has access to all your awkward thoughts, your uncertainties, and your self-editing process. Other people only experience the final version that actually comes out of your mouth.
FOMO. Your phone lights up with photos from somewhere you almost went. Friends are sitting around a table, someone's recording a concert, someone's laughing so hard the picture blurred. You weren't even interested in going when the invitation happened. Now, suddenly your evening feels smaller, simply because another evening exists somewhere else. That feeling is fear of missing out, better known as FOMO, the uneasy sense that meaningful experiences are happening without you. Social media turned what was once an occasional feeling into a constant background process. Your brain evolved to pay attention to exclusion, because for most of human history, being left out of
the Chameleon Effect. You're talking to someone, and without noticing it, your posture shifts closer to theirs. They cross their arms, and eventually you do too. Their speech speeds up slightly, and somehow yours follows along. By the end of the conversation, you're using phrases you don't normally use and laughing in roughly the same rhythm. This is the chameleon effect, your unconscious tendency to mimic the behavior of the people around you. The leading explanation is that your brain uses imitation as social glue. Matching behavior subtly communicates safety, familiarity, and cooperation long before words do the job. What makes it different from copying is intention. The chameleon effect usually happens completely outside awareness. People who like each other tend to mirror each other more. Friends do it. Couples do it. Entire groups slowly synchronize without anybody voting on it. Conversation often feels natural, not because the right words were spoken, but because two nervous systems quietly agreed on the same tempo.
Pratfall Effect. Someone at a party is funny, confident, and effortlessly charming. Then they spill a drink on themselves or walk into a door that clearly wasn't there a second ago. Strangely, people seem to like them more afterwards. The mistake doesn't damage their image. It rounds off the edges. This is called the Pratfall Effect, the tendency for highly competent people to become more likable after small, harmless mistakes. Psychologist Elliot Aronson first described the phenomenon decades ago. Perfection creates distance. Imperfection creates familiarity. What makes it different from laughing at someone's failure is that the mistake has to feel human rather than humiliating. Public embarrassment isn't charming. Minor vulnerability often is. Your brain trusts people who seem real more than people who seem flawless. A perfectly polished person can feel like a statue. A person who drops their keys while telling a story feels like someone you could actually know. Pratfall Effect. Someone at a party is funny, confident, and effortlessly charming. Then they spill a drink on themselves or walk into a door that clearly wasn't there a second ago. Strangely, people seem to like them more afterwards. The mistake doesn't damage their image. It rounds off the edges. This is called the Pratfall Effect, the tendency for highly competent people to become more likable after small, harmless mistakes. Psychologist Elliot Aronson first described the phenomenon decades ago. Perfection creates distance. Imperfection creates familiarity. What makes it different from laughing at someone's failure is that the mistake has to feel human rather than humiliating. Public embarrassment isn't charming. Minor vulnerability often is. Your brain trusts people who seem real more than people who seem flawless. A perfectly polished person can feel like a statue. A person who drops their keys while telling a story feels like someone you could actually know.
Social snacking. You scroll through old messages from years ago. You rewatch an interview with holidays with people you barely speak to anymore. Maybe you rewatch an interview with a creator you like, or reread a conversation that made you laugh. Somehow, you feel slightly less lonely afterwards, despite not actually interacting with anyone. That experience is called social snacking, using reminders of social connection as a substitute for direct interaction. The most accepted explanation is that your brain responds to symbols of belonging more strongly than we often realize. Memories, photos, and familiar voices can briefly activate some of the same emotional comfort as real connection. What makes it different from avoiding people is that it usually works best as a temporary bridge, rather than a replacement. Humans carry pieces of other humans around in their heads constantly. Sometimes a photograph isn't just a photograph. Sometimes it's your brain reheating the feeling of being part of something.
Moral elevation. You watch someone stand up for a stranger or help somebody with absolutely no reward waiting at the end of it. Your chest feels unexpectedly warm. Your throat tightens slightly. For a few minutes, the world feels less cynical than it did before. That response is called moral elevation, the emotional reaction to witnessing acts of kindness, courage, or generosity. Researchers believe these moments may encourage cooperation by making prosocial behavior feel rewarding to observe, not just to perform. What makes it different from happiness is that happiness often turns inward. Moral elevation points outward. It makes you want to become slightly better than you were 10 minutes ago. It's one of those feelings that's hard to describe as either emotional or physical because it arrives as both at once. The world doesn't improve all at once. Usually it improves in tiny moments that make witnesses out of everyone nearby.
Parasocial attachment. You've never met this person. They don't know your name. And yet, when they disappear from the internet for months, you notice the absence immediately. Their voice feels familiar. Their routines feel familiar. Losing access to their presence feels oddly similar to drifting away from someone you actually knew. This is called a parasocial attachment, a one-sided relationship formed with a public figure, creator, or personality. Your brain builds social models from repeated exposure. It doesn't always distinguish perfectly between interaction and observation when enough familiarity accumulates over time. What makes it different from obsession is that parasocial relationships are often healthy and ordinary. Most people have them to some degree. Problems only appear when the illusion of intimacy replaces real intimacy entirely. Human beings weren't designed for a world where thousands of strangers could feel familiar enough to miss. Yet, here we are, carrying acquaintances who have never heard of us.